Hey there, and welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take review of the game we just finished playing, Seven Wonders. But before we do, I got some poll results. This week I tried something a little different. I think I want to try doing this on a regular basis. I did a Battle of the Boards poll. I picked two games that had a lot of similarities, and I let our poll respondents give us their thoughts on it. I said, which is your favorite of these two sci-fi themed board games with heavy resource management elements? I prefer Gaia Project, but the rest of my co-hosts are on Team Eclipse. That was my understanding at the time, and I think your comments on the poll back that up.
Well, Eclipse is a fantastic game, and Gaia Project is just not that good. No, I'm just kidding. They're both fantastic games. I prefer the shipbuilding in Eclipse. That's ship, S-H-I-P, shipbuilding in Eclipse. And the battle mechanic and exploring and flipping over these tiles and seeing if there's two production planets there or some other little spaceship that maybe I can go and attack and get some bonuses for. The discovery part. And then having that little think-off duel, that kind of, the last time we played, it was a total Cold War battle. So nobody really went and got after each other. It was just kind of a standoff all around. So just that intrigue, and then I love the combat in Eclipse. So you build your ships, you see how well they perform. Is your shield going to counter this guy's missiles and this guy's cannons? Now looking at Gaia Project, oh my gosh, the game is amazing. It's a slow build. You're kind of engine building. You have to make all these tough decisions. This resource to get these other resources to walk up these tracks and find some amazing combos and explode the last few rounds. And that's just a harder puzzle for me. I think it's great and I can appreciate it, but it's not always the kind of puzzle that I'm looking to do, and it's the kind of puzzle that Tim, you constantly thrash me at. I guess most of the puzzles are ones that Tim thrashes me at, but I enjoy them all, and that's my take on Eclipse versus Gaia Project. What about you, Chris?
You know, Adam, everything you said about Eclipse, I got a second. I think that's all true, and I couldn't have said it better myself, so I won't try. In terms of the Gaia Project, in fairness to the game, I mean, I know this is a well-loved game. It's high on BGG's all-time list. And I have the experience of having played it exactly once. And, you know, who knows? Maybe I was in a bad mood that night. Maybe, I don't know, I got trounced particularly bad and I just don't remember what happened. But I will say that I have an incredibly negative impression in my mind of that game. And that's kind of like the hot take problem, right? You know, it's like you play something once and it's like, again, maybe you had a bad night and maybe you didn't. And I remember feeling like somebody just made this big mashup of let's throw every mechanism you can possibly imagine into one box and then go for it. Whereas Eclipse feels very cohesive in the sense that I feel like I'm always moving forward towards something. I have this vague recollection of Gaia Project as being, I'm just flailing around doing a bunch of things, none of which feels like it's telling me a story, like it's building any kind of, you know, momentum. And again, that may be completely unfair, but that is sort of my gut reaction to the game.
So we actually reviewed Gaia Project in episode 5, and we reviewed Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy in episode 12. So if any of you listening want to really hear our hot takes on it back when we first reviewed it, go back and check out those episodes. I don't think, Chris, that was that harsh on it right after playing it. I'd love to reintroduce you to it. Let's take a look at the poll itself. These two options, right, they actually came in pretty close, but Gaia Project snuck out the win. Out of the 21 votes on this poll, 52% said Gaia Project, and Eclipse Second Dawn for the Galaxy had 48%. I think it was like 10 and 10, and then I think the final vote pushed it over the top for Gaia Project. So,
did you just have your daughter make a Twitter account for this and have her do that final vote?
Hey, here's a question, and I wonder if this might actually be a dynamic here with our listeners, is that Gaia Project is readily available, and I believe it's a pretty modestly priced game. Eclipse is not readily available. You have to like order it from Lithuania or something, and it costs like $500. So I wonder if part of that may just be simply familiarity with the game.
No, I think, first of all, Gaia Project is clearly a better value than Eclipse. So you've definitely made that clear right now. But I don't know. I mean, you know, I think I got a lot of comments here saying I haven't played both, so I can't vote. Mm-hmm. There's maybe some truth to that. So here's what some of our what some of the respondents said. So Jeff said, dice rolling randomness can be riveting and like war. Randomness equals chaos, so it suits the theme well. But Gaia Project is like a huge puzzle, so it's a hard pick. And he went with Gaia Project because there's so many great decisions to make. And I agree with Jeff. Gaia Project is like, can I plan 5 rounds ahead, make this all work out? And when I do, it's awesome. And Eclipse is like, I'll take a shot and flip over this random planet. Oh, it doesn't give me anything. Bummer. Okay, your turn. I like Eclipse, but man, it can be so random and frustrating sometimes for me. BCB Ryan said, why can't I vote for Twilight Imperium 4th edition? I didn't include it in the poll, Ryan. I'm sorry. You can't vote for that one because I didn't include it. If we ever play it, maybe we'll do a rematch there. Board Game Chatterbox. My favorite new friend is Board Game Chatterbox. I wish he was like in the US and could hang out and play games with us.
You get her on the show.
Yeah, let's do it. You heard it, Board Game Chatterbox. Just reach out. We'll get you on the show. But she said she objected because it's a poll she can't take part in because she hasn't played the games. So sorry about that. And then of Dice and Men said, can I like them both for different reasons? Yes, absolutely. But you still have to pick your favorite. Sorry about that. Slight win for Gaia Project. Chris, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong. And in fact, you're even more wrong because I know both of you guys voted for Eclipse and only I voted for Gaia Project. So that means the listeners actually had a little bit more of a edge up on Gaia Project there.
Well, actually, technically, I didn't vote because I missed the poll.
Okay.
Too late. And so
all right,
my vote was not recorded. So, yeah.
So it's actually a tie.
Yeah.
So it's actually a tie.
That's hilarious, Chris.
Okay, cool.
Because you commented on here and said, I want to vote enough times that it changes these poll results, but I assumed you already voted once, but you just missed it.
I just missed the poll.
That will wrap up that conversation. If you guys enjoyed that Battle of the Boards, let me know because we'll be doing some more of those probably in the future. If you hated it, then let me know that too so that we stop doing it. Well, let's jump into a description of Seven Wonders.
In Seven Wonders, you're trying to build the most advanced civilization over 3 eras or rounds. In each era, players start with a hand of 7 cards, which represent the buildings they construct for their civilization, which they'll draft by taking one and passing the rest to the player on their left. This will continue until each player has drafted 6 cards, and the last one will be discarded. When a player chooses a card, they have 3 different options. The first option is to construct that building for the benefit it provides. In order to build it, they'll need to pay the costs listed on the building, either with production they have in their civilization, or by buying the needed materials from a neighboring player who has that type of production constructed by paying them 2 coins. The buildings come in several different types, including brown and gray, which all create resource production to help you buy future constructions. Green buildings have one of 3 science icons on them and will be worth points at the end of the game for sets of those icons. Blue and purple buildings, also worth in-game points. Gold buildings give you coins immediately or may reduce the cost of trading with specific neighbors. And finally, red buildings, which provide you with military symbols and are assessed at the end of each era for points. The second option for the card you have selected is discard it to take 3 coins from the general supply. Third and final option is to use it to construct part of your civilization's wonder. That's any card you can use to construct your wonder. Each player starts with a unique player board that has either 2 or 3 spaces to build a wonder. Each space has a cost, so if you can pay the cost of that part of the wonder, then you discard the card and get a related benefit, which may be points, coins, additional production, or some other ongoing benefit. Remember we talked about military? Well, at the end of each era, players compare their military symbols with the players to their left and right. If they have less military symbols, they'll lose a victory point. If they have more military symbols, they'll gain 1 point in the first era, 3 points in the second era, and 5 points in the third era. After the first era, players will be dealt 7 cards from the Era 2 deck, perform the same actions, and this will continue one final round for Era 3. At the end of the third era, players count up points from the military victories, points indicated on their constructed buildings and wonders, points for sets of science icons, and 1 point for every 3 coins in their supply. The player with the most points is the winner. Seven Wonders is designed by Antoine Bauza and is published by Repos Productions, who provided us with a review copy of the game.
They just recently, I think it was last year, put out a second edition that had some upgraded components, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. As far as our individual plays, Chris and Adam, this was your first introduction to Seven Wonders, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
We got like 8 games of Seven Wonders in tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about how we managed to pull that off and whether that's a positive or negative. I personally had a little bit of experience with Seven Wonders in the past. I'd played on the board game app, pretty solid app implementation for it, but I've also played the physical production of the first edition of Seven Wonders in the past, and then I've played the second edition several times before we got together tonight and played. gives you a little sense of our experience. Gameplay and mechanisms, your guys' first time playing tonight. What stood out to you, Chris?
The first thing that stood out to me was the drafting mechanism. This is the first time that I've ever played a game that is just pure drafting. I have played, many games where there is a drafting element to it, like Blood Rage is a good example, but I've never played one where the main mechanism is you just kind of passing these hands of cards around. And I thought that was really interesting. I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed the way that you use the cards to build up your production in order to buy cards that were more powerful, and that ultimately the cards got more and more powerful, as they do in many games, toward the end of the game when you're no longer able to buy production, but really have to focus on maximizing your points. And like you said in the game description, you can either get cards that give you some kind of production, some kind of resources, or you can get cards that give you points or give you the ability to interact with other players' resources in a certain way, a trade kind of situation. And I liked how all those mechanisms kind of came together. One complaint that I had, and this is not so much a complaint as it was just kind of an observation, it's that one resource that they make quite a deal of is the money, the gold. And honestly, there's enough gold generated throughout the game that it never felt like that was a stopper. It never felt like I couldn't do something because I didn't have enough gold to do it. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But Adam, what did you think?
I occasionally had my struggles with gold. So sometimes I was up there in 20, 30 gold, but a lot of times I'd be down below 10 and hitting 0. And then when you ran out of gold, it really limits your options for using those trading posts.
As far as the gold goes, I was struggling with it the entire night tonight, every single game. I was never selling cards for gold if I could help it. I was always trying to use them, and I never seemed to be getting trading posts. So I was always having to pay 2 gold if I needed to borrow a resource from somebody. And I was just stuck all the time. There was so many cards I couldn't buy, even in the third era, a lot of the time. So Chris, you and I must have been playing a little bit different there. But for me, gold was a really interesting mechanism here. The fact that you can buy whatever resource you have if you have the gold for it, but you got to use cards to get that gold in the first place.
The gold was interesting to me, very interesting. Anyway, yeah, mechanic wise, the draft is the clear king of the mechanics here, but from that draft spawns so many interesting decisions. So 7 cards, and you pick one, and that's going around and around and around. First round left, second round to the right, and then back to the left on the third round. In subsequent rounds, the second and third round, there's all these little chains that Chris alluded to, that if you built this in the first round, well, that gives you a free pass at buying this next technology or next card for the second round, and so on and so forth. And if you get a couple cards linked together, you can buy this thing for free. 3 cards linked, you can buy this thing for free. So if you know the cards well, if you know the deck well, you can really rack together some free cards. That was pretty neat. Another mechanic I'll bring in here is the wonders themselves, and how those had variable powers on them. So you have these mats in front of you, and they're the wonders. Some of them have 2 stages, some of them have 3 stages, and as you gather enough resources or gold or money or whatever to build these stages of the wonder, you add to your engine building, and you have the potential to get more points by building the wonder. So what do you guys have any thoughts on the wonder mechanic itself?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it's not just more points, but it's also that sometimes you get a special ability. Sometimes it's a one-time ability, or it's an ongoing ability.
Right.
And yeah, that was really cool. Like it really makes the game feel different every time you're playing. Like, how important is the wonders to me? How does it work with the strategy I'm going for? An alternate way to use those cards that you're drafting. If there's a card you don't want, it gives you another way to use it. And I think that's really cool.
A very non-scientific survey of the games. I think after each game, it gives, at least on the board game arena implementation, it gives you all of your stats, basically, how many points you scored for each of the various categories of scoring. And it was interesting to see that there was really no strategy that took the day every time. Tim spent a lot of time going for the sciences, and that was often a very good method of getting points, but it wasn't always. There was a couple of games where that just didn't do it. And there was some games where the military completely killed everybody else, somebody who had a high military count, which can give you points at the end of each round in battle. And that ended up scoring you a lot of points. I had one game where I won, where I didn't have much military or science, but I had a lot of just straight point buildings. And so there really were a lot of potential paths to victory here.
One of the things I like about that, Chris, and what I've found over multiple plays with this game is that a metagame develops really quickly with the group you're playing with. First couple of games, people are just feeling out the cards, trying different strategies. Oh, but it looks like science won the first 2 rounds. So now all of a sudden everybody's drafting science cards, and those science cards are much less useful when everybody's going for them because they're distributed more widely. Nobody's getting the big runs. So the one person that went for the civilization cards in that game and ignored the meta ran away with the victory. And then the same thing happens with the military, where 3 people are just getting beat up on with military power. And so then the next game, everyone's drafting military, but the one person that didn't runs away with the victory because, yeah, they had to lose a few negative points, but they got all the science cards or all the civilization cards. So it's funny how there's a meta that develops. There isn't one strong category. It really depends on how everybody interacts with it. So if it looks like one strong one, then everyone kind of goes for that and it makes it weaker. You can kind of play a little poker. Like, do I shift now? Do I go for something else, assuming that everyone else is going to pick this other strategy this game, and maybe I can optimize on it and take the win with it? And you kind of have to be watching the other players throughout the game. The mechanism I wanted to talk a little bit about was the player interaction with the people around you. And that's important, but really watching what everybody's doing in that game to know whether science is going to be strong and you've got to block it, or whether civilization cards or civilian cards are going to be strong, or whether military is going to be a dominant factor. You do have to kind of be watching that with everybody. The thing that I really like about this game, though, and the player interaction, though, is the 2 mechanisms that require you to look at your neighbors and pay attention to what they're doing. The first is the military. I think it's such a genius mechanism because if you watch and the person next to you grabs one military card, the next card that comes to you can be like, okay, well, if I grab one, now I won't take a hit on this and I'll be safe. But you can do that enough where you're just watching what the other people are doing, going after military. And it's kind of like, it leads you down a path that isn't necessarily optimal, because if you're just sitting there watching, going like, well, he grabbed one, let me grab one. Oh, he just grabbed another military. Now I've got to get another one. And I've spent 3 of my cards to stop from losing 1 point, where I could have picked up 7 points in other opportunities at that point. And so it's really fun to have that in there, have the opportunity to make people watch for it, but also it's kind of like a trick that the game does on the players. It feels like, oh, I don't want to lose this military conflict. It's kind of like real military conflicts, right? You just keep going into military conflicts. That's not good for anybody. Adam, you had something to say?
Earlier, you were touching on one of the aspects that I really enjoyed was kind of the multi-use function of these cards. So if you did see somebody building up a big science engine for scoring points at the end, you could take a science card and use that to build one of the stages of your wonder, or use that and trade it in for $3 and just get that card out of the game. So you could deny your opponents some of those cards, be it science or military or whatever they might be going for, if you just wanted to build a stage, build a stage or use it for something else and get it out of the game, deny them the ability to use it. So that's what I wanted to bring up while you were touching on this whole science engine and military thing, and the ability to deny other players' cards was something I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, I like that. And a lot of drafting types of games, you can always hate draft, right? That's the term to use when you take a card specifically so somebody else can't get it. This game does give you something to do with that hate drafted card instead of just leaving it in your deck or your tableau. Maybe it's not very useful. It doesn't work well with your strategy. It's not going to benefit you. So, hey, let me turn it into something else. And that's great that there's always those 2 generic options that you can potentially convert a card you don't want someone else to get into something that's beneficial for you. The one other thing, though, I was going to mention about with the watching the players to the left and right is the trading mechanism. And that is that anytime you can't generate a resource that you need, you can always buy a resource from the people to the left or right of you. But you have to, if they can generate it, but you have to pay 2 coins, unless you get one of these trading posts, or there's a few cards that let you reduce that cost to 1 coin. But I think that's really cool. Like, I found some really fun games where I was like, hey, I'm gonna not buy a lot of resources early because I'll just assume that I can get them from my neighbors. But then, hey, neither of my neighbors built stone, so I was just short on stone the whole game because I didn't build any and nobody else built any. So I literally couldn't buy stone at all. And I thought that was cool. You really have to watch, is it not just that I need a resource, but also do my neighbors have it? Because I may not even be able to get access to it. So another really cool way to make you pay attention to what other people are doing. Even though you're really playing your own game, you gotta pay attention to what everyone else is doing there.
Yeah, I think I probably spent as much time paying attention to what you guys needed as what I needed, because if there was a situation where there was a card that I really had to have to make something important happen, of course I was going to grab it. But if there was a series of mediocre cards, the next question is, well, whoever I'm going to be handing this this hand of cards to, what do they need? Because I don't want to give it to them.
Yeah, totally. One other thing I wanted to mention in the mechanisms here, or the gameplay, and that is just how quickly this game plays. We were playing on Board Game Arena tonight. When I played in person, it goes a little bit longer. Usually a game is done in about 30 minutes or so as people start to get to know the game. So it's fairly quick. We played on Board Game Arena tonight where you're not really dealing out the cards and all that stuff, but we were getting out a game in like 15 minutes. It just feels like for how quick it is, it's a lot of fun decisions in that time period. Chris, what did you think about the gameplay time?
I thought it was great. And I was actually curious. You had just answered my question that I had, which was how long it takes to play when you're not playing it on the online mod. And I would love to give it a try live, but just playing it on the computer, it was a really good experience. And I love games like this. I mean, I love Star Realms. I love these kind of online, card, deck building games, things like that you can play quickly. And this is one where I felt like if you knew the cards really well, if you kind of knew the distribution, you could really play some intelligent games and really put a game together in a very strategic sort of way. The way you can in a deck building game where you know the cards really well. In this one, none of us had really played it before other than you. And by the, 7th, 8th game, whatever it is we played, I feel like I was starting to get an idea of how to do it. But up until that point, it was a sort of a slow build. And for the first game or two, I just felt like I was mashing buttons. So I like the fact that I had the opportunity to learn the game over the course of, an hour and a half or whatever that we played. And I feel like the game would get better and better as I played it more and more.
I couldn't agree more, Chris. I think I mentioned it while we were playing that I love these kind of games. Under an hour, easily under an hour for this game. It gives you the opportunity to get it to the table more or get it on the computer screen more and figure out that strategy, figure out what sort of surprises are there in the game and see what emerges and see what comes out on subsequent plays. So this game just was really appealing, lightning fast on Board Game Arena. I think we played Sun games in 10, 12 minutes, something like that. And it was just fun to crank out however many games we played, 8 games or whatever. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, now my only complaint about a game that plays that quickly and that you're kind of hitting that full experience in such a short period of time. And the problem with playing a game repeatedly this much is that you do start to, in this case, I felt like the game arc started to get a little bit repetitive. And I think that's probably true of most modern hobby board games. It's just that when a game takes 2 hours to play, you don't get to play it enough to feel that repetition. I could see this getting a little stale if you played it too often. This is a game that we were playing 10 times a night. This is the only game we were playing. I think it would start to feel a little stale. Yeah, there's an interesting decision to make every time, but the first era, you're mostly buying resource cards, maybe picking up a couple of science or military. The second era, you're getting a couple more advanced resources, but now you're really starting to focus on your point generation. And then the third era, it's all just about grabbing points. After about 12 games for me in the last week, it started to feel like, okay, I kind of know how this is going to feel. That said, every game played out completely different, and the strategies that players picked and what you got to optimize always played out different. It's just that it felt a little repetitive.
Curious to hear your answer to this. So Star Realms is a game that you and I have been playing for a long time. We probably play 3 or 4 games a day. I think by now we've played roughly 2,000 games together. Mm-hmm. Is this game different than that in the sense of what you're talking about? Like, do you ever feel like what is it that sets Star Realms apart that makes you feel like that one doesn't get old, but this one does? Or is that the case?
Yeah, I don't think anything, to be honest, because if you were just playing with the base deck of Star Realms, I think it has the same exact issue. If when we were just playing with the base deck, or if we just play with the base deck for a long period of time, you start to feel like, okay, I know exactly what every person's going to pick on their turn. And the arc just can, there's some surprises. All of a sudden there's that command ship in the deck in turn 3 and somebody else managed to pick up the freighter or whatever it is, and they were able to pull it off. So you get some kind of unique things that happen, but mostly it's just a game of doing the same things over and over. So when you're just playing with the base deck, it feels exactly the same as this. Where it gets more interesting is you start to add in all those expansions, and then it's such a variety of cards that can come up. I've heard with Seven Wonders, and I haven't had the chance to play them yet, but there are some expansions that I think do add some interesting variability. So I think that those are probably worth exploring if this is a game that you love. I think it's a game that we're going to want to go back to occasionally. I'm really interested in checking out some of those expansions and seeing, do they make the gameplay arc feel differently? Do they kind of give us something else to explore there?
So Board Game Geek does list 16 expansions for Seven Wonders here.
Wow.
A lot of those are
Okay.
fan made, kind of one. A lot of them are gorgeous. So I don't know how many of those are readily available or easy to get your hands on.
Well, let's jump into the production. You've only played on Board Game Arena, so you've had a chance to see the card art from that perspective. So I want to start by talking a little bit about, since Repo sent me a review copy here. First of all, production's really nice. The box art is beautiful. There's a nice insert in here. It does just have traditional cardboard coins, for the coins themselves. But that's pretty much the only kind of resource component you're working with. There are also little cardboard chits for the military victory points as well as the negative points for those. So pretty standard, nice thick punch board though, decent quality there. There's a couple things. One I really liked about the second edition, and that is that this is such a little thing, but the backs of the era cards, the cards that you're drafting, era 1, 2, and 3, the era 1 cards have this really beautiful, like a copper color, but it's like a metallic sheen on it. So it really feels special. And then the era 2 cards are silver, and then the era 3 cards are gold. So they got this really cool metallic sheen on the backs of all the cards. But then they just have a big Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3 in the middle of those cards. So it's really easy to separate the cards back out after the game and get set up for the next one. Just cool. If you look at the original cards, it just has some colored art on it, which feels pretty traditional. This felt special. It feels like it's an upgraded version. The second thing, though, that I noticed about the physical production, which you guys got a chance to see as well, is just that the art throughout this game, to me, is just done really well. And I think this art is the same that was on the first edition. So like the art that's on the Wonder boards and the art that's on the cards, I believe is the same that's on the first edition from what I could tell. But I think it all works great, and it feels modern, it feels fresh, it does not feel dated, even though this game is many years old at this point. What do you guys think about the art?
I thought it was fine. I mean, there was nothing about it that excited me. I thought it was perfectly acceptable. It worked well with the game. The theme I did not find particularly interesting. I mean, the Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, it's, pretty pedestrian. But I don't think that hurt the game too much. The art was certainly good enough to get the point across. It was pleasant to look at. It wasn't bad. I didn't find myself looking at it going, oh, this is too dumb looking or cartoony or badly drawn or whatever. The million different things that you might look at a game and dislike about the art. It didn't do any of those, so it didn't shoot itself in the foot. There's no self-inflicted wounds here. But I also didn't feel like it was particularly exciting either. But again, I don't think it hurt the game any.
Adam, tell me why Chris is wrong on that.
The art is fantastic. The it was great. It drew me in a lot. So it is the Seven Wonders of the Ancient World, but it gives you this whole new perspective on it. It's not just these old ruins. It's the wonder as it might have appeared when it was active. So you get this, I don't know, you're looking at somebody, you're looking down on like the Colossus or something, and it's just active and alive, and there's people down there going about their daily lives, or in some kind of like ceremony or some kind of party down there, and like stuff's happening. It's super engaging for me. So I really enjoyed the art. It brought me into the game and made me want to engage more with the game. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think the actual art is the same. Again, I've only seen the second edition recently, but I was looking at some pictures on the first edition, and from what I could tell, it's actually the same art. But what they did improve drastically with the second edition is the card layouts. And it's not that drastic of a difference, but the biggest thing is that the entire left to right of the card is fully, the art, it covers the entire thing. So on the old version, a lot of the cost icons would kind of cover down the left-hand side. And so the art just didn't feel as big. It didn't feel like you got to see as much of it. Now here they do have the cost kind of in a little banner that runs down the left-hand side. So on some of the cards, it doesn't cover much. But there's one thing that they did that was really important here, because I did get a chance to play with the first edition. And I remember that there are these chaining cards. If you buy a card earlier in the game, then a card comes later is free. And the way they used to represent that were some little banners on the bottom right-hand side of the card that told you what the future card you could buy is. And it was impossible to watch that. You're looking at all the iconography on the left-hand side, so you kind of stack up your cards on your deck. You want to make sure the icons on top are showing, but then you'd cover up the free cards on the bottom. So I got a chance to play Seven Wonders Duel recently, and I was really happy with what they did with that art, with that same mechanism, is that they put just these little very readable icons that represent basically at the top of the card, aside from the benefit, it also shows an icon if it can buy something in the future. And then the cost on cards would either show the cost or would show the icon that could buy it. So it was a very easy link to tell whether the card that was in your hand was something that you could pay for free. And so it's so much more readable with this second edition, because they put the iconography in a place that's always visible. You're not covering over with other cards. I just found it really easy to use with this version of it. So I think that was a big improvement.
Chris, for the production, what did you think about some of the names on these cards?
I'm trying to remember what they were, because I remember being kind of amused by it. Like the place where you made your bricks was a clay pool.
Yeah.
So I kept thinking of, Les Claypool from Primus, and what was the other one?
I was gonna say, if I didn't have as many clay pools as you do, then I've got less clay pools, right?
What was the other one we were laughing about?
Siege Workshop. That's one.
Oh, the Siege Workshop. We're gonna have a Siege Workshop with some Siege breakout sessions.
Some brainstorming.
But hey, Adam, I want to go back to your comment about the art, and I want to argue with you a little bit here.
All right.
So tell me about one piece of striking art that you saw that wasn't on the Wonder card.
That wasn't on the Wonder card? Ooh, that could be.
That was not on.
That could be a tough choice. You might have me there, Chris.
No, there's a ton of them. Like, check it out online and look at any one of these, and they're all great. They all like Adam said. The theater is this great like theater with this crowd around it. It's colorful. There's this military card that has like these camels on a red glowing, like you can see the dusk in the background and you just see the silhouettes of the camels in the front. I think they're all like really evocative of the time. What I think you're missing though, Chris, is that you want some kind of like cool fantasy setting here. This is a real traditional civilization building game. This is trying to say like, hey, we're starting from the beginning of civilization, and you're going to experience real world events that have happened and the types of technologies and things like that developed in an early civilization game. I don't know how you could represent this any better than it is.
I think you guys sound like fanboys. I mean, it was fine.
Okay,
it was fine.
Chris, I did want to ask you about this being a civilization game, because you've mentioned in the past that you're fascinated by the concept of a civilization game. You played Tapestry, and that was kind of your first exposure to it. Did this give you any more of a civilization building feel, or did it feel more mechanism focused, kind of like you felt with Tapestry?
It felt incredibly mechanism focused to me. It did not feel like I was building a civilization. It felt like I was playing cards for optimum use of resources. Mm-hmm. I did not feel like there was any story to this, like that anything was really progressing. Yeah, so I didn't get that out of this game.
Okay.
I agree with you, Chris. Again, I thought the art was cool. It brought me in, but it did not feel like a civilization game at all. I didn't feel like I was building up this thing to do this other thing so that my people could be happy and go to the arena and watch Spartacus and do this and that. Didn't get any of that. It's just all mechanisms for me. Tim, you have a different opinion about that?
No, not necessarily. Okay. But I've always felt like most civilization games are, like think of what's that game?
The Vladikavadal, the Through the Ages.
It doesn't really feel any more abstract than Seven Wonders does. I think what this does, similar to that Vladikavadal game, is that it sets a realistic course of actions, right? Like in the first era, you can build things that would happen in an early civilization. And then the second era, you can start to build things, and some of them are built off the back of previous, technology, or off the back of previous inventions. So I think that both these games do that in a way that Tapestry doesn't, in which you can, like in Tapestry, you can go to space and then invent paper. This has that structure to it, but I think when you're playing the cards, I don't really feel that I'm building a civilization. I feel like I'm optimizing the best icons, which is fine. I was just curious if you felt any different, Chris.
No, and I mean, I feel like that's a lot to ask of a simple card drafting game. So I didn't expect that of this game, and it didn't do that, but I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, to give an example of some of the names, this is the Seven Wonders Armada expansion. You have Frothy Harbor, Sheltered Archipelago, Luxurious Archipelago, and Topaz Island. So I think those are all just kind of cool and evocative, and some of the names were clever in bringing me in points of discussion for us while we were playing, so I enjoyed the names. A little bit more about the expansions here. So I said there was 16. Of those 16, 10 of them have like 150 votes or less, and 9 of those are like 100 votes or less. So a lot of those are just fan expansions that somehow made their way onto Board Game Geek. Now the other 6 all have over like 1,000 ratings. So those are a little more legit, and I believe those are all available in some capacity, whereas you're probably going to have some issues, some troubles finding the fan-made ones.
And we don't want fan-made expansions anyway. We don't like variants around here. So.
We don't like house rules around here, these parts. So 6 official variants that, as far as I can tell, from Board Game Geek.
I want to play that Frothy Harbor.
Frothy Harbor, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, right on. Hey, so listeners, if you play Seven Wonders and you have a favorite expansion, let us know what it is. Maybe we'll check that out next. Any favorite moments in gameplay tonight that stood out to you?
I had a moment of the night for me. It was, I don't know, game 6 or game 7, when my slow brain finally started putting this together. And I probably had the Wonder board that was probably the overpowered one. And it was the one that let me buy the first card and the last card of each round for free. So I was putting some pieces together, racking up some points, and at the in-game scoring, I got the little cha-ching from Board Game Arena that told me I won the game, and I was super pumped. I think the rest of the time I had 1 second place finish, and the rest of the time it was picking up the pieces back there in 3rd or 4th, and many times in 4th place was just way behind in a pile of dust. So overall, a great night. My brain got to put together this puzzle. I need a lot of plays of a game to get any kind of hold of it. So just a fun night playing all these games over and over and over again.
Yeah, that was a moment that stood out to me too, because like I mentioned earlier, we kind of started to see a meta developing where it just seemed like whoever kind of focused on technology was the person who won if nobody else paid attention to it. And that game, I had like 2 huge sets of technology, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to lose this game. And then we get to the end, and I was like, oh crap, Adam's going to push over the top with this last military conflict. And so it was cool. It was really cool to see that even though in that game, it looked like there was going to be one obvious strategy, you kind of optimized in a bunch of different worlds. And I don't think your board was overpowered. I think you're the first one of us that recognized it was valuable and you took advantage of it a little bit, but I don't think it was overpowered compared to the other ones. It was kind of neat to see that there was a clear variety of paths, even though it seemed like the one thing that had been working well was going another direction. What really stood out to me as far as a moment was the first couple of games, I was kind of doing the same thing, and I'd played this game several times before, but I was just like, okay, buy resources and then just try to pick up some points here, points there. I think it was the 3rd game, and Steve was the first one that hit those technology cards and got a large set of it and just ran away with the game. Like, huge difference in points compared to the rest of us. And I was like, oh, okay. Some of these things are starting to cement a little bit. So yeah, it was just cool, that discovery. It took a little while, but the game plays quick enough that you have the opportunity to go back to it and keep hitting these things. What about you, Chris?
I had a number of times throughout the night that I got kind of a charge from building my wonder. And I thought that was a really exciting thing when you get that the set of resources that you need to have, and you flip that last card, especially if it's one where you're going to hose your neighbor by using up one of their the cards that could have been useful to them and using it to build your wonder. And then you're like, okay, double whammy. The only downside of that was that it really didn't end up being as impactful as I thought it should have been. I mean, this whole game is the 7 wonders, and yet that didn't seem to be that much of a defining factor in whether you won the game or not. I mean, there was a couple of them where I had blasted through my wonders, and I think there was a couple where I was the only one who had done much with my wonders and got my butt kicked. And so it just felt like there should have been a little bit more to that. It was a lot of fun. I mean, that part of it, it was exciting doing that, even if it wasn't the game changer every time. I still thought it was a fun mechanism. I enjoyed it, and I really got a kick out of those moments when I got to put a new level on my monument. Yeah,
and I would just counter, Chris, that I think the reason why it's important that the wonders aren't the most powerful thing is because it was never an easy choice to say like, hey, I've got a handful of 6 cards here. I'm going to take one of them and build my wonder. Instead of it was always usually the lowest level on the wonder wasn't that valuable. Maybe it's only worth 3 points or something like that. But you have to get that built to get to the next level, which might be a fairly big thing. But now I've got to give up 2 cards in this hand of cards essentially to draft, to kind of build the first 2 levels. And so it was a tough decision. And there were some cool effects you got, and there was a decent amount of points to be had in some cases, but it was never an easy choice. Every game I struggled with, should I waste cards or resources building this this part of my wonder or save it. And I think that's kind of neat. It's going to vary depending on the cards that are coming and how your strategy is building, whether the wonder makes sense for you or not. And I think that's good that that's a fun decision and not a clear decision with every game.
Sure. I mean, I guess my thought was just, if you're going to have a game where the marquee item is your wonder, the game is called Seven Wonders. If it was called Life in Ancient Greece, that might have been a little bit different. But it was called Seven Wonders, and so I felt like the wonders should have been a little bit more impactful.
All right, fair enough. Would you guys request to play this game again?
Yes, I would request to play this game again. I think it's like a perfect filler. It probably, plays in real life, like you said, Tim, 30 minutes or so. It's just fun. It's ideal. It's easy. It's quick. It's snappy. Good decisions in a short amount of time. Yes, I would request to play this game again.
How about you, Chris?
Absolutely, I would. I had a great time, which is funny because I feel like I'm saying a lot of, kind of mediocre things about it tonight, about the art and, the comment I was just making about the wonders and all that. But honestly, I had a great time playing this. I really enjoyed it. We played 8 games. I could have played 20 more and not gotten bored, I don't think. And Tim, your point is well taken about, without expansions, this might start getting old. It might start getting too repetitive. But honestly, after playing it for a night, I wasn't there. I wasn't at that point yet where I was starting to get bored, nor did I see that on the horizon. So I would love to play that one again. I don't know if it's the kind of thing we're going to bust out routinely for game night, but that's certainly a game where, as a filler or something to do, and you only have a little bit of time and need something quick, I'd love to play that again.
Every time my internet goes out when we're playing Eclipse or something, you guys jump over to Board Game Arena, whip out 3-4 games of Seven Wonders, and dial back in and be back up with you guys.
You totally could.
Adam, I feel like there's a better solution. Like maybe just get your internet fixed. I don't know.
That's a crazy idea.
We've only been doing this for a year.
Well, you do live out in the country, Adam, so it's understandable that you'd have, trouble with your internet.
You would think in the heart of any listeners in here in Long Beach, help me out. Get my internet fixed, please.
So for me, I really enjoyed the plays of this. And I think that, like Chris said, it's probably not going to be typically the full feature game of game night. Glad that we did it tonight and we got a lot of plays in to kind of compare them and kind of see how it played out. But this is a game that I will often be playing. Like I'm always looking for, there's only a certain number of games that will fill a space in your collection as to why would I pick this game over this other game. And right now there just aren't really many. Well, there's two things there's two niches this game fills. One is it's kind of that like filler plus weight. Sushi Go is a great example of a game that clearly took inspiration from Seven Wonders. It's got a same 3-round drafting mechanism. It does almost the same thing, but this one has a little more meat to it. There's a cost on the cards. There's serious choices to make every time. And that makes this, to me, a game that I actually enjoy, even if it fits that smaller time slot that I wouldn't, pick for my game night. But there's always opportunities to do that. But here's the other thing that this game fills, and that is that it plays great up to, I think it's 7 players. Yeah, 7 players. And I've played this at 6 players, and it played just as quick and just as smooth as it did with us playing 4 players. And as I've played several 3-player games as well. So at all of these player counts, it's basically the same amount of time to play. And it's really fun. In fact, I even like it, I think, more at 6 or 7 players because there's just so much more going on the board. And basically what happens is that they add in more cards. So there's more kind of repetitive cards the more players you have. But it gives you more opportunities to kind of, go after different strategies and block your neighbors. What you really have to track doesn't change. You have to track your neighbor's resources. You have to track your neighbor's military. And beyond that, you can just have kind of a fringe understanding of what else is going on the board. Do I need to hate draft from somebody else? But probably not, because I'm going to let my neighbor hate draft against that person that's 2 or 3 people away. To get that many people in a room and try to get a game that can run smoothly and well organized, there's not that many games that do this. And Seven Wonders does a great job with it. There's going to be a lot of opportunities where this is the right fit, even if it's not going to be like the main course at game night. Let's move on from Seven Wonders, and we're going to talk about some things that have been on our table, as well as some future takes on games that are going to be coming out right after this. All right, welcome back. So let's talk about some games that have been on our table. Chris, what have you been doing this week?
I have been spending a lot of time playing a game called This War of Mine, which is a bit of an infamous game, as many people are aware that it is, as I've heard it described, less a game than an experience. It is not a game you play to win. And the idea behind this game is that you control a group of survivors, hopefully survivors, in a war-torn city, it's a fictitious city, but it's modeled after the siege of Sarajevo, I believe, was the inspiration for it. And the whole idea is just to stay alive long enough to win the game, essentially to make it to the ceasefire. Before I get into the kind of the mood of this game, I'll just talk about the mechanisms a little bit, so it'll make a little bit more sense. So the board is set up so that on one quarter of the board, you have a series of locations around the city where you live, and some places where you can interact with those locations. And the other 3/4 of the board is a bombed out house that you're living in, separated into a number of squares, roughly the size of a playing card, because each of those spaces is going to get a card or a deck. And it's a pretty intimidating looking board. It's giant, and it's got about 20 decks of cards on it. And there are cards for, the chapters, events, goals, characters, things you can build. So there's a lot of stuff happening with cards on this board. But the primary space that you're operating is in this house. Within this house, each card is a room that you can flip over and get what's in that room. So you spend a fair amount of time exploring your house, trying to get resources, using that space to build up your mechanisms. You can build radio, you can build a bed, various things that you can build to keep yourself alive longer and to make life a little bit better. So that's what the board looks like. The game is separated into a number of phases that are essentially parts of the day, and each round of the game is one day. And you start with the morning. In the morning, you draw an event card. It creates some kind of game condition, like it may add cold, which causes damage to your characters or illness later on in the game, or various other things that kind of set your day up. And then your day actions involve things that you can do within your shelter, within the bombed out house that you're living in. That's where you go around exploring the house, trying to make it into rooms, and you have to do things like picking locks or digging through rubble that make it incredibly logistically difficult to do any of that stuff. And the whole idea here is that you can't go outside during the day, because if you do, you might get hit by a sniper's bullet. One thing you can do during your day actions is you can go outside and potentially meet somebody outside the house, but the first thing you do when you step out that door is you roll the die to see if your person gets shot by a sniper. So you don't do that whole lot, and you potentially let you bring somebody new into the shelter who could help you by providing more actions or opportunities. And as you're going through this part of the game, it has probably the most frustrating mechanism, and I don't say frustrating like necessarily bad, frustrating like the thing that drives the tone of this section, is that each of your characters has 3 actions that they can take, and that could be moving around, it could be building something, it could be exploring, it could be picking a lock. There's a bunch of different things you can do, but you only get 3 actions. And the more your characters degrades, in the sense of they're more ill, or they're more wounded, or they're more miserable mentally, or fatigued, or hungry, each state has the ability to reduce the number of actions that you can take. So you may find yourself at a point where you've got 3 characters, each of whom gets 1 move, or you may get some characters who have no moves available to them. And at that point, there's almost nothing you can do other than have them rest or recuperate them by from whatever it is that's causing them to lose their actions. The next phase is the dusk phase, and that's where you feed your people. And that is probably the most depressing part of the game, because so much of this time in this game you spend not actually having the resources to feed your people. That creates more hunger, that creates less ability to take actions. It's this almost frantic time that you're going, oh my God, what can I do here? How do I feed my people? And then after you feed folks, give them water if you have it available to you, then you go into the evening phase. The evening phase is where you either send out a scavenging party, put guards on your door, or both. Hopefully both, if you have enough actions and folks that are available to do that. After the evening phase, you set into the scavenging. During scavenging, you take your scavenging party and you go over to the left side of the board, that 1/4 of the board that is the rest of the town. It's an interesting mechanism. You draw a hand of cards based on the distance of that location from your house. You may draw 14 cards, and they're called exploration cards. And then just one by one, you flip them over. Each one tells you to do something. Sometimes you'll get things. Sometimes you'll have to give up cards. Sometimes you'll meet residents who live wherever it is that you're investigating, and maybe they attack you. Maybe they don't attack you. Maybe they trade with you. But you're really kind of, every time you flip the cards, you're going, oh, what's going to come up next? Hopefully during the scavenging phase, you're finding a whole lot of stuff out there that you can bring back to the shelter and keep your people alive. After the scavenging is done, you move on to the night raid. That's essentially where outsiders can come in and try to attack your house. They try to get in, and whoever you have guarding the door can fight back using whatever weapons you have that you've given to them and try to keep the bad guys out, and frequently fail, at least to some degree, to protect the house, because they usually will either take wounds or they will lose some amount of supplies within the house. But nothing ever good comes out of the night raid phase. Lastly, you go to the dawn, where the scavenging party returns. You assign medicine, bandages. You draw a fate card, which is another one of those moments where you kind of cross your fingers and hope that you survive, because it'll tell you conditions like, if there's this much level of cold out there, you're going to lose this much health for this many characters, and just basically another cascade of bad things that are going to happen to your characters. And then if you start all over again, you go back to the morning phase, you draw another event card, and you go on and on like that until you either survive or die.
So the win condition is just if you survive, if your characters haven't all died by the end of some number of rounds. Is that right?
Yep. I believe it's about 10 rounds, I think, roughly.
So yeah, like how does the game resolve? Do you are there victory points like for surviving? Is there a measure? Is it just like try to see how many people survive through the rounds, and is the goal to just see the experience of what it's like living in a war-torn country, or is there actually like, congratulations, you did it?
In a sense, there is congratulations, you did it. And that is if you have one character from your original party that survives until the ceasefire, then that is considered a victory.
Wow.
And interestingly, this is a cooperative game, but it's not a cooperative game in any sense that I normally think of that. You're not working with anybody else. In fact, at any given time, there's a number of times throughout each of these phases where you hand off to the other players, but then all you're doing is handing off the decision to another player. They then take control of all 3 of your characters or 4 of your characters, depending on how many you have at that point, and then they make the decision. And then you hand it back to the other player, and then that person starts making the decisions. Interestingly, when I first got this game, I looked at BGG, and the recommended player count was 1. This is a game I don't think I'd ever want to play with somebody else. I tried playing it once with my wife, and for one, she just didn't like it at all. But the other thing was I didn't want to share the decision making with anybody. I just wanted to sit there and make my decisions in this kind of grim, grit your teeth and just move forward kind of way. I don't like I said, I don't think I'd want to play this game with anybody else.
Have you ever survived, Chris?
No, not even close. I think the farthest I've made is to night 3. And so far I've had every game I've played, I think I've played about 8 games of it now, and the first 7, every one of my characters committed suicide until the last one, and then they all starved to death.
Are you enjoying your gameplays of this? Is it a game? Is it one that you want to keep coming back to?
Is that the right word, enjoying? Like, are you appreciating the experience? I don't know if enjoying is the right word. How do you feel about it?
I am appreciating the experience. I almost feel like this is a character flaw on my part. Maybe it's lack of empathy, but some of the reviews that I had read said that you don't go into this trying to beat it. This doesn't feel like a normal game. But honestly, every time I get done with it, I get completely destroyed by the game. And the first thing I want to do is set it back up again and see, can I do it this time? Can I make it? Can I survive for another night? Can I survive to the end of the game? So I do keep feeling like I want to beat it as a game. But at the same time, the stories that you hear in this are so heartbreaking. One thing that I didn't mention before was that at all these stages, there are times when instead of an action taking place, it will point you toward this book called the Book of Scripts. And in the book, there is just 2,000 little scenarios, I believe, that are just a paragraph of text that tells you about something that happens and then some outcome of that. Like you roll the dice to find out if you are able to catch a rat to eat for dinner that night. There was one time that I came across somebody had left a kitten on my doorstep. And the question was, do you take the kitten in or do you leave the kitten? And my first thought was, holy crap, what would I do in real life? I'd want to take the kitten in. But is the kitten going to have to be fed? Am I going to have to give my food to the kitten? Or maybe the kitten's going to catch rats for me so that we can have those for dinner and it'll bring in food. It was just this heart-wrenching, what's the right thing to do here? In the end, incidentally, the kitten, I brought the kitten in and it neither ate my food nor brought me food, but it did give me the opportunity that if someone took a turn to pet a cat, it would reduce their misery. So you could actually use the cat as a misery reducing tool, just like real cats in the real world.
So does it feel, with the 8 gameplays you've had so far, is there a lot of variability left? Is it worth going back to, or is it starting to feel redundant?
That's hard to say because I've done so little, and I feel like so much of this game is a story. It's almost like watching a movie. It's almost like, it's like that. It's like reading a book. And a lot of that is driven by the book of scripts. And I've only scratched the surface of it. I can say that at this point, I'm not bored of it at all. I could probably play it another dozen times and not feel bored of it, I think. But at the same time, it's one where after that Sunday morning playing this game 3 or 4 times this last weekend, I had to put it away because it was depressing and it was frustrating. And ultimately, I guess my take on this game is, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, then it's probably something you ought to give a try. Because there really is something, I think, interesting and important happening here. It's an exercise in empathy. It's an exercise in great storytelling. And it really does create this scenario where you're able to kind of try, at least in some really superficial way, to put yourself in the shoes of someone in this situation. And again, hopefully exercise a little bit of empathy. If this doesn't sound interesting to you at all, probably best stay away from it because you're not going to enjoy it. Ultimately, I think that I gotta tip my hat to Awaken Realms for actually publishing the game. I'd be curious to know how many copies of this they've sold, because there is not much about this game that reaches out to probably the average gamer and says, play me. But they did it, and I think that they tried to do something really important here, and I really appreciate that they did.
Chris, last question for me on this, and that is, you picked this as your first solo gaming experience. Are you going to be going back and doing other solo gaming, do you think, after this?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I got the idea because we had our episode on solo gaming. And so I went out and looked and I was like, okay, well, I don't know. What would I want to play? And this game came up as one that has a good solo mode on it. And so I gave it a try. It's one that kind of fascinated me. And I'm so glad that I did, because it taught me that I can play solo games. And even if I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, I was engrossed by it. And I want to be engrossed in the storytelling of a solo game like that. And now I've got a handful of other games that I want to try, including a couple of games that I already own. And I'm absolutely thrilled with how solo gaming feels after playing this.
Right on. So Adam, what have you been playing?
Okay, on a much, much, much lighter note, the game I have been playing is Kabuto Sumo. That's designed by Tony Miller with art by Kwanchai Moria. In this game, I'm going to paraphrase the description on Board Game Geek, which is from the publisher. The rhinoceros beetle in Japan come out during the springtime. Those guys come out and they battle each other. They have a little fight and they try to impress their friends with their strength. That is how the World Insect Wrestling Championship League was formed. So you're one of these insects fighting each other, trying to win the game. And how do you do that? Well, there's like this little tree stump. And on top of that tree stump, there's these discs. They're little wood discs of different radiuses, different radii, as they say in the geometry industry. You're pushing those on one side until it's completely onto the stump. You have a little launcher twig stump thing that you put around the circumference of the circle. You slide this other circle onto the board, the wooden kind of coin, different size coin or token. Boom. And whatever it bumps against, it's going to slide off to the other side. And that's it. You're just trying to slide the other person, the other character, off the edge. That character starts with these different circles surrounding it, so it's kind of safe for a while. I mean, that's the whole mechanism of the game, right? Sounds simple, right? But from these different size and different shapes of tokens that you're sliding on there, all this crazy stuff happens. You don't know where this piece is going to slide or this other piece is going to slide. You think you might have it all lined up. You're like, I got this great shot. It's going to push him right off. Well, your wrestler will end up spinning around some wacky way and pushing all this other stuff over here and making the other wrestler super safe. And now you're just giving the other guy a perfect shot to push you off the stump. This game's great. I played it with my 6-year-old. She has crushed me at it. She likes to do this little rapid fire thing, get high energy on one of these little tokens and launch all this stuff everywhere. I go with a slow old man shot and it doesn't work quite as well. There's a surprising amount of strategy and you're kind of looking down at the board. Okay, how's this going to slide? What's going to happen? That's Kabuto Sumo, one of the only dexterity, maybe the only dexterity game that I own. I love this game. It's so much fun. It's tactile and it's beautiful. What do you guys have to say about Kabuto Sumo?
I've been following Tony Miller on Twitter for several years, and I think it was 3 or 4 years ago that he was posting some early prototypes of this game, and I was always fascinated by it. It seemed like a fun little, like the classic coin pushing games that you would play in the arcade, where you push a coin on, you want it to the other coins to fall off, so you'll get the tickets for it or whatever, and that's what it reminded me of, and it seemed interesting. But I remember his prototypes always, it looked like it was just circle discs of different shapes, like you mentioned, or different sizes. But then I've seen some finished versions of this, Adam, and it looks like there are different types of insects you can be.
Yeah, so there's a couple different modes. You can be the junior league. So if you want to play with a kid and you don't want to have any kind of superpower, you just start with these pieces. And a lot of the bugs, a lot of the beetles or insects, whatever they are, have a special piece that's not a circle. Like the centipede has, I don't know how many, 10 would be thematic, but I don't think it's 10. It's like, I don't know, 7 or 8 little legs that they can use.
I think it'd be 100. 100 would be thematic.
Is that what it is? I don't know the metric system. I'm an American. So then there's like the stag beetle has this little stag horns thing you use to push instead of a circle. And so that's the junior league. You just get the pieces. You don't have to earn them.
Okay.
In the upper leagues, each little card, each little beetle character has like a special move. So if you get like 2 of the little green discs, you can trade those in for your special piece, or give the other opponents 2 brown bigger circles and you get your special piece and you'd be able to slide that in.
Okay.
So it's strategic. It's really some nice strategy going on here. It's cool.
So I'm curious, Adam, is this a game that we could play or that you'd bring out on a game night? Or is this, I mean, assuming we were in person, obviously this isn't one you can play on Tabletop Simulator, but is this a game you'd bust out with us?
I would absolutely bring it. It'd be so fun to like have a little tournament or whatever with this. Definitely a filler. You could play this thing in like 15 minutes and be done with it. You get the same kind of feel from playing like shuffleboard or darts or whatever at the pub or at the bar.
Is it a 2-player game only, or can you play 4 players?
No, you can play 2. I played it at 3.
Okay.
It's fun at 3. You just go round and round and round. And it says there is a 4-player mode. I forget if you just take turns and you're on the same team, or if you put all 4 wrestlers out there. I think it's you take turns and you do teams.
It looks so cool.
I love the final production, the Kwanshan Moria art on the box beetles with like sumo underwear standing up there on a ring.
It's a beautiful production. The Kwanshan Moria does the art, and the wooden tokens have this nice paint, and they're so smooth, and it just feels good to handle these things and play around with them.
Quote of the show: Tim likes the sumo underwear.
I've got a game. It's been a few weeks since I played it, but I did want to talk about it. There's a game called Flamme Rouge, which is a bicycle racing game. And basically, you're controlling a team of racers. So it's 2 racers. It's the roller and the sprinter, which I think are some kind of French words for the sprinter and something else. I don't know. But basically the way this game plays is that there's a modular board that gets set up. So it's kind of like a track, and there can be curves and there can be straight, lengths and things like that. Racers start at the beginning, and you want to be the first one to end to cross the finish line. Or if multiple people cross in the same round, then you want to be the furthest forward past the finish line. So it feels like a traditional racing game. But the way this plays out is that every player has 2 different decks of cards, one for the roller and one for the sprinter. And the sprinter's cards, they have a couple higher numbers on them. So they might have a few 9s in the deck, but then they also have some lower numbers like 2s or 3s in there. And then the roller has a more even distribution of like 4 through 6. But it's essentially a deck building game. So what happens is that on your turn, I think you pick like 2 cards from each, and then you pick which of the 2 cards you're going to play from each racer. Everybody puts the 2 cards that they picked face down, and you all reveal them at the same time. So when I reveal my 9, then I would move my racer 9 spaces if I was in the front, or what turn order, I think it's turn order based. And then the next person would put their racers however far they're going to go. But then once I played that card, I remove it from the deck. So I only get 2 or 3 9s in my one racer's deck. And once I've spent them, I can't do that anymore. Basically, it's representing how much energy they put into doing this race. So they really sprinted ahead. They spent 9 actions, but now they're tired. So they're not going to get that kind of level of energy again. Everyone's got the same deck. So eventually you'd think that all the sprinters would get the same distance on the board, etc. But there's a couple little mechanisms that allow you to take a tactical advantage. Number one is that if you're ever in the front in the race, then you're going to get basically a 2 speed card that goes into that racer's deck. So you don't too often want to be in the front of the race. And that's thematic for bicycle racing. If you're in the front, then you're taking the most wind resistance. But also, if you ever end one space behind another racer, then you get to move forward one space. So the whole mechanism of this game is about not getting too far in the forward, but if you can guess where somebody else is going to end and try to get your biker to stop one space behind them, or set yourself up because you got a team, so you can put one of your racers up, you know your other one's going to end up one space behind them, you've just gotten a free extra space for the game. But then maybe another racer comes in there and slips in between the two, and then you didn't get that benefit. So it's all this like thing about just constantly trying to not get those -2 points and get the one extra space here and there. And that's about the only way that you're going to make any, real movement in this game. So that's essentially how it plays. It's really simple. The different decks of cards are just numbers on them. So, you're just basically revealing the numbers. There's no special abilities or anything like that. It was a fairly interesting game. I don't think I'd need to go back to it too often. I think it was kind of lacking in the variety. And I feel like more often than not, you just played a 45-minute game and maybe you got a little bit lucky that you picked the right card at the right time. And that's going to push you over the edge. And we played I think it was a 6-player game. And we had, I think 5 of the 6 of us ended on the same round, just all within one space of each other. So pretty interesting. It was fun. It was always fun to flip over those cards. Did I overguess and like shoot ahead of the pack and, get the negative for it? Or did I get right in the right spot and, get an opportunity to move up a little bit? So, there was some pretty entertaining decisions to make. And I think it's fun for like once in a while, kind of like Cubitos, that betting thing, like let's put some money on this game and see if we can see who's going to end up where. But there's not a lot of strategic choices to make here. And I felt it just got a little bit redundant and just a little dry for what should have been kind of a fun, exciting moment. So have you guys heard of Flamme Rouge, or have you ever had your eye on it?
I played this one before with James and Sanchez from Dad's on a Map.
Okay.
And I had the same sense, Tim. I felt like it was a lot of, oh, did I guess right this time? Nope, I didn't. Okay, well, I guess I'll lose. So that's kind of how it went for me. I know there's a bunch of different kind of maps. There's like with a gravel road or a single track lane or some different map variations. Did you play with any of those? Yeah,
we played with one of the new expansions, and I think it added 2 things. It added like there were some
hills,
some pinch points.
Yeah,
there were some pinch points where like I don't know if this comes in the base game or not. There was a few different landscape variations, but there were some pinch points where you could only get one racer through, so that could stop things up.
Right.
There were some pieces of land where you couldn't draft if you got it. Like essentially you couldn't take advantage of it if you landed in that space. And then there was like kind of a bidding mechanism at the beginning where if you bid some card, then you could start a little bit earlier, but you had to give up a card. So a couple little minor things. I don't think it, even playing with all that stuff, it added that much interest.
Right. I felt the same when I played it. Just kind of lackluster, mediocre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, glad to hear that you didn't get blown away by it and I just completely missed something there. So we're going to talk about some games that we're looking forward to in our future take segment. So, Chris.
Yeah, new Kickstarter started this week. It's called The Spill. It's a game designed by Andy Kim with artist, wait for it, Kwanchai Moria.
Nice.
Adam's favorite, who we just talked about moments ago, to be published by Smirk and Dagger Games. And this one mainly attracted me because it is so infrequent that my work actually makes it into a board game that I couldn't help but be fascinated by this. I work in the spill response world. This game is basically a sort of fictitious version of the Deepwater Horizon BP Gulf of Mexico oil spill from back in 2010, where you have this board where it's a big circular board in the middle of it. It looks like there is this multi-sided dice tower that you have these black dice that you put into it, and they come out, and whatever they land on, that's where you put them, fanning out from this center dice tower. And the circular board has, in various places, you have sea life, and there are the response ships that are controlled by the players. And the idea for the players is to move around the board, rescuing wildlife and pushing back the oil and trying not to let the oil overtake everything as it pours out of the damaged oil rig. It's a game that wouldn't necessarily be first on my list because it's a cooperative game, not generally my favorite. Although now that I'm learning how much fun a co-op game can be when you're playing solo, So there's a solo mode to this game that looks kind of interesting. And just, I love what they're doing message wise. There's a lot of misunderstood about the oil spill world. There's a lot of things out there that are caught, potentially dangerous to wildlife. We all hear about drilling in the Arctic and offshore drilling. And in California, a few years ago, we had a spill down in Santa Barbara County. This is something that, we sort of, it happens all around us and only makes the news when something, goes wrong. But things go wrong often enough that we ought to be aware of what's out there happening. So that's kind of my soapbox version of why this game is important. But it also looks kind of fun, and I like what they did with the Dice Tower. It looks pretty unique, and I think it's going to be worth checking out.
That's actually what I was going to talk about tonight, Chris. So I'll just mention that, it's interesting. This is another cooperative game. And, we were just looking at Earthrising recently. I mentioned it last week. Game about trying to address climate change and some of the impact that humans are having on the environment. Also a cooperative game, which makes a lot of sense. You and I are both not very big fans of cooperative games in general. Do you think this is a game that looks interesting enough to draw you in, or, that you want to give it a try just because of the theme?
Honestly, if it wasn't for the theme, it probably wouldn't be on my radar.
Mm-hmm.
But, I looked at the mechanisms and it looks like it could be some fun. Like I said, I don't think I'd want to play it, as a cooperative game. I think it might be fun. If it's to work for me, it would probably work as a solo game. So I'm interested in trying it.
Okay. I was just trying to think if there were going to be any games that might address climate change that would be competitive games. And that's a little hard if you're trying to get the messaging across. You're trying to do something positive for the world that you're fighting against other people for it. But there was one game I think it's worth mentioning in this sphere, and I haven't played it, but it's CO2, which is a Vital Lacerda design. And there was a recent re-implementation, CO2 Second Chance, in 2018. My understanding in that is you're actually playing energy CEOs, but there is a strong element that if, as you're essentially building up your energy plants, that it starts to create pollution. And so if there's enough pollution, everybody loses. So there's a little bit of a semi-co-op in making sure that you're not creating enough pollution, or you just can't win the game. But then you're also competing to, make money and essentially be just clean enough to sustain. So it has kind of the messaging and a little bit of informational about what kind of impact this industry is doing, but it gives you still that competitive gameplay going on there.
Oh, that's
I think it'd be really fun, to find something like The Spill that is truly competitive if they could make it work in a thematic way. But I did look at this game. I think it looks really cool. Great components and seems like a fun little, interesting game. It almost reminds me a little bit of Return to Dark Tower, in that you've got that tower in the middle, and then basically what comes out dictates what kind of damage you're dealing with and what kind of stuff you're having to address. So it's kind of interesting. I wonder if it's kind of a lighter version with a more unique theme on it there.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that about Return to Dark Tower, because they did describe this as a reverse tower defense.
Yes.
You're actually trying to keep things back into the tower, but it also reminded me, in kind of a strange way, of this other game called Fire Tower. Are either of you guys familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
And it's funny because it actually illustrates, I think, what you were trying to say, Tim, about how if you're trying to do something, environmentally relevant, then you kind of has to be cooperative. That's a competitive game where there are fire towers around the board and there's a wildfire happening, and you're trying to defend yours and push the fire over toward your opponents, which is, it's an interesting idea, but that just doesn't really seem to get with the spirit of environmental consciousness. So it sounds like it's more fun because it's competitive, but maybe loses some message.
Yeah. Adam, what have you been looking at?
Yeah, there's a game I've had my eye on. I'm on the fence. I probably won't end up buying it, but that is Shasn Azadi. Shasn is Shasn. This is kind of an expansion or re-implementation or a reiteration of Shasn. So Shasn is a board game. It's designed by Zane Mimone, and the artist is Sumik Lahiri, and that the publisher is Mimsys Culture Lab. And this is a design team out of India. And Shasn is I think it has extraordinary art. It's really unique. You take on the role of a politician, again, paraphrasing from Board Game Geek. And each turn you draw a card and you take a stance on issues. And that helps you either influence voters or gather resources in sort of this political hall. And you're it's kind of an area majority game. So there's a lot of intrigue, a lot of negotiation, a lot of debate between players is what it sounds like. I've heard mixed reviews, heard some good things, some bad things. But I've just had my eye on this Azadi reiteration of Shasn that's on Kickstarter right now, just because it comes at board games with a unique angle and it offers something very different. The production is pretty amazing, but you feel that amazing production in the price tag for the game. I think it's upwards of like $125. I don't know. Is it worth it? I don't know. You guys tell me. I see you guys looking at it right now.
Yeah, it actually looks like a really interesting production. I mean, it's great, vibrant colors, and the kind of the main territory control boards maybe look modular or something, but they seem pretty interesting looking.
Yeah.
But it looks like a lot of cards and cardboard here, so that does seem like a pretty high price from a component perspective for this type of game.
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I don't see where they're getting the $120 for.
And maybe that is accounting for shipping costs in this new era of board game delivery that we're having to deal with these days. So could be some more factors than just the production going at that price tag.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely seems very unique. And again, it's kind of cool to see a game coming from a different part of the world with different concepts around politics and just a different take.
Yeah, it's an interesting game and it offers a unique perspective. So if this sounds at all interesting to you, take a look and see what you think. I think it has me intrigued.
All right. Cool. Yeah, right on. So since we're on the topic of Kickstarter, I just want to prep our listeners for what you can expect next week. And that is that we're going to be revisiting our top 5 incoming Kickstarters. So we did this episode about a year ago, and we looked at 5 games that we're really excited about that we backed on Kickstarter or crowdfunded, and we're excited for them to come in. So you can go back and listen to that episode if you're interested. But we're going to do something kind of fun. We're going to do the same thing this year, but before we get into our top 5 incoming Kickstarters, we're also going to take a scorecard of last year's top 5 Kickstarters, see how they came in. Did they get delivered on time? Did we even get them? And did we actually like the games that we got? So it'll be a fun look back at those games that we were really excited about a year ago and how they're going today. But then we'll also get to look at some things that are going to be coming up that we're excited about. I think that'll wrap us up for this week. If you want to catch up with us and chat with us online, you can find us on Twitter at BG_hot takes and on Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes and on Instagram at BG_hot takes. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.